Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name's Hilary Seabrook, and for this episode I am joined by Paul Edis, who joined me just over 2 years ago for episode 92 of Harmonious World, and we're now on over 200. Paul is joined by Vasilis Xenopoulos, and their quartet has a new album out very shortly on Ubuntu Music, and it's called Feels Like Home. What you're listening to now is the opening track of this album, Going Home. I'm going to ask Paul and Vasilis about this, but essentially it reminds me very much of that whole kind of musicians travelling home late at night and feeling very comfortable when you get there. So, thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoy listening to my conversation with Paul and Vasilis. Hey, how are you doing?
All right, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. So you and Vasilis got together at sort of when you moved down to London, is that right?
Yeah, the first time. So by which I mean I actually moved down to study when I was 18. I went to the London College of Music in West London, and sort of bumped into him there. And yeah, it was pretty much 20 years ago we started doing some gigs together. We had a regular gig on Sunday afternoons at a place called Baroque in West Ealing, where we do like 3 sets of playing standards, and basically that was a big schooling for me because Vasilis was a bit older than me. He'd studied over in the US at Berkeley College, and he really knew what he was doing, and I really didn't. I think, really, to be honest. But he soon put me right. So those we started playing together all that time ago, and then after college, I actually moved back to the northeast, where I'm originally from. For a number of years before moving down just in time for a pandemic. So
Yes, that was perfect timing.
yeah, couldn't have picked it better.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that I'm working on at the moment is a book which will include sort of extracts from all those conversations that I had with musicians during lockdown. Yeah. Because it feels like otherwise we're going to lose sight of how awful that was.
Yeah, I think there's a thing which, and I've heard a few people say this, basically it was so intense and so, awful for everyone, living through all that. I mean, some people much worse than others. And then the moment things became vaguely normal again, we've all had a massive exercise in repression, just forget about it all, get it out of the way. It's which is actually very unhealthy.
Very
unhealthy way to deal with something. It's completely understandable. And I've had that thing where you try to remember the timeline, and even that is kind of strange because you kind of, like I did some gigs with Joe. We went out to Dubai, I think it was in March 2022. And the fact that actually we still had to do COVID travel forms, there's all sorts of stuff going on then. Because in our mind, I think we've all just kind of gone, oh, that was 2020, maybe 2021. But there was a lot of stuff still happening. And then obviously there are still people living with long COVID as well, which is a whole nother thing. But
well, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so there is, it sounds like a very good project that actually kind of to document what people were actually saying at that point.
Yeah. We all felt a bit lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sense of, how bad it was. And I've spoken to a few people actually who they're not suffering from long COVID, a sort of medical thing, but they're still suffering from that enforced isolation and the fact that when you went out, we were allowed to go out once a day, and you went out and you, if you saw somebody walking up the path towards you, you would kind of walk onto the road or cross over or whatever. And that's so anti what sort of community is all about.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a strange thing, and that sort of strange thing of being, for example, on the tube and occasionally remembering that not that long ago, being in a packed tube carriage would have felt terrifying.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
a strange thing to. This is what I mean about the great sort of act of just ignoring it all. That everybody's some sort of colluding in on some level because I think it's how we survive. Um, yeah, once not that long ago, many people wouldn't have wanted to be in that situation. Whereas now it's like, well, now people don't necessarily wear masks. Everyone coughs on each other,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
each other's armpits. It's like we've just forgotten it all. But yeah, that's I guess that's how it's
Yeah.
gone down.
Yeah, yeah, and it is funny when you see people walking around with a mask on, but particularly actually when they're outside. That
Mhm.
always freaks me out a bit because it's like, well, we always knew. Ah, here is Vasilis.
Ah,
So welcome to Harmonious World, both of you. Now I had a little chat with Paul at first, but Vasilis, welcome.
Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for having us, Hilary.
No problem. I'm very excited about this. I really like this album. I had my physical copy through the post, so that's good. Um, But I'm interested. I spoke to Paul a little bit before you joined us about how you got together, um, sort of 20 years ago, originally in West
Uh,
London.
20 years in West London. So I haven't heard what Paul said. So I might repeat. I
That's
might
good.
or this is one of those. This is one of like fact checking to see whether we agree on things.
Yeah.
So Paul was. Paul, I think Paul was an undergrad student at London College of Music, and I was doing a postgrad. And I got offered a weekly jazz residency in Ealing, and I wanted someone enthusiastic, good player that was willing to to put up with me and my silly choices of tunes. I know I have a soft spot for learning all the time new tunes. And Paul, being a composer, I think from a very young age, he shared that enthusiasm of exploring a new repertoire all the time. Because like sometimes you get to a gig and people they're going to play the standards from the well-known standards, and when you suggest something new and they don't want to read the new chart and say, oh, can we play something we know and all that. But Paul, I don't know whether he was enthusiastic or because he was a bit younger, he didn't want to say no to me back then. Uh, but we explored quite a lot of repertoire from the classic American songbook, if it's the right thing to say.
Yeah, because there are some great songs that have sort of been that have fallen by the wayside, aren't there? That and actually they work really well still.
And you
yeah,
can you can always, yeah, Paul, your take. You're the composer.
yeah. I mean, the idea of the Great American Songbook's a kind of amazing thing in that. Sorry, in that so many of the composers who fit within that idea wrote so many songs, and yet only out of all the musicals they wrote, only a fairly small number exist within the jazz repertoire, and even within that, in 2024, it's probably, I don't know, 5% of all of those tunes that people still play. So there was something quite, I mean, for me, about just learning how it all worked. But these tunes kind of stay there somewhere in the back of your mind about doing the standards that aren't the ones that everybody does at college and aren't the kind of straightforward ones you expect to do. And they're amazing. And actually, some of the best tunes are the ones no one ever does because you can't necessarily blag them quite as easily. If you see what I mean, you often on jazz gigs there's not as much time, so people go for a shared song which they can do without too much preparation. but some of the most interesting tunes by Jerome Kern or Cole Porter or some of these composers, they take a bit more thought maybe and a little bit more care, or it might be simple as, you know, the real book versions aren't actually great, so often people have ignored that because they realize the chart's wrong, or
Yeah.
you know, it's funny how repertoire develops not necessarily through the best of intentions but just through necessity. People end up playing certain tunes where there's all these other ones available. So yeah, it was amazing to sort of have these opportunities to play loads of interesting tunes with Vaz guiding me through this repertoire of things I'd never heard before.
To add on what Paul just said, I think one of the reasons why we end up in the jazz world playing a small percentage of the tunes that all these great American composers, I say American, but it's not just American, but the majority of them are American. Another reason has to do with practicality, like maybe the songs that they survived through the decades are the ones that they have more compatible forms which makes it easier for people to improvise. But I think there's still some amazing compositions, like as Paul said, but Jerome Kern, Cole Porter, or Gershwin, or Irving Berlin, all these guys, that despite that they have more peculiar forms, you can still make them functional in a jazz setting.
Yeah, I was just checking my notes actually because a couple of weeks ago I was at a gig, and the guitarist, and I can't remember his name. That's really bad.
He's only guitar.
Tom Ollendorf. Tom Ollendorf.
Oh,
yeah.
Tom Ollendorf is. I take it back what I said. Tom is amazing.
He is. He played a version of Answer Me, and it was just beautiful.
I don't know the version of his version of that tune, but knowing Tom and how much hard work and practice he does every day, I'm pretty sure that his version will be amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So you obviously started because as the second this album starts, you two sound like you were born to play together. It's really interesting. There are a number of times as I've been listening over and over to the CD. There are a number of times where one of you will play something and the other one, a couple of minutes later will echo that, but it's not straight away. It's just like a little bit afterwards. You put something in, and so when did you write the pieces together?
Paul, you want to go first?
Well, the conception of the album, I suppose, was because we recorded it February last year, so that's February 2023. But we started thinking about it, I suppose, the summer before, when we kind of saw the writing on the wall of we've been playing together for a hell of a long time. And then the concept of music with a theme connected to the idea of home, because we've both had this thing of being based in so many places, and obviously for me it was quite fresh at that point, having just moved to London, relatively speaking, and started again. So then it was a case of partly of pulling together, because one or two of those tunes actually have been around for a while. It's just there was never the right context for them until now, and then all of a sudden they made sense with this theme. And then there's some new ones on there as well, that were written around that time. And yeah, there's a lot. I mean, like Vasilis could say a couple of things maybe about his tunes, because they're quite specific. I think sometimes the context behind them maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've got this this kind of like ongoing joke lately. I just realized I do write a lot of tunes after places or after people. So maybe my 2024 resolution would be to write about something else. So the couple of tunes that I've written for this album, one of them it it's a story of of a jazz enthusiast. The song is entitled "Get Off My Lawn," and it's about the jazz enthusiast who took it a little bit too far. Anyway, it's a long story, and encourage people to come to the gigs if they want the full story. And the other song that I wrote is called Memories of Home, and yes, obviously, people who know me, they will probably think that I refer, like my home country, that memories from from Greece, like the place where I was born. But not really, because I've moved so many times around, and as a matter of fact, I've lived all my adult life, most of my adult life. Actually, no, all my adult life. I've lived away from my home country. So home has a more metaphoric sense. In a way, for me, home is an environment with people that I love and I feel very comfortable with. So yeah, that's a little story behind these two tunes.
Right. Um, the opening track, "Going Home," it's really funny. You mentioned, Paul, that you had a gig last night in Oxford, and that you've sort of and there's something about coming home after you've done a gig, that late night drive, and it suddenly brought all of that sort of flashing back into my head. I don't know if that's where it was coming from, but that's where it took me, if you like.
That there's two things on the album actually connected to what you said. So the one that really connects to that for me was the tune "Coming Home to You," which I actually wrote in that context. So I had a late gig and I got back home, and I live in a flat, quite a small flat with my wife, and basically the room where the TV is, where I might sit, when I've just got back from a gig, and you don't want to go straight to bed because you've been driving and you're still a bit buzzed from the excitement of the gig. So the room where I sit is right next to the bedroom, so I can't really sit and watch TV if she's asleep, which she was on this occasion. So I actually sat there and scribbled out this tune, "Coming Home to You," this kind of ballad thing in three, which was actually kind of dedicated to her, the idea of getting home to someone nice. And there is the very specific post-gig feeling,
Very, yeah.
which if you're a gigging musician, you know this. And funnily enough, it depends slightly on the gig, because there's some gigs you're absolutely buzzed because you think, "Oh, I'm so glad I'm getting away from that." Not because you had a great time, but because you think, "Oh, that was horrible." That, to be fair, I've never had that with Vasilis. Most gigs, though, in the jazz world, when it's a real, when you have had a fantastic night, you sort of glide home for the first hour at least, just saying, "Oh, that was great," and "that was great," and it's a bit like, it makes you feel very childlike in a way, and you have this buzz from it all. But that other tune, "Going Home," the one that opens the album, actually has a connection right back to my childhood, in that I played the church organ at school, and I played before that, played assemblies in school. I used to play the piano in primary school for assemblies. And one of the tunes I remember doing was that for a school concert. I was probably like 9 or something. I probably made loads of mistakes, but who knows? And that's what I knew it as, was "Going Home," where, of course, the melody, a lot of people would know it as the Largo from Dvorak's Symphony Number 9. Or, as I like to say in the gigs, a lot of people would know it as the Hovis advert.
Yeah.
Because, again, that was a memory, I think, that's, even though I was probably still quite young to have had all that wash over me, it gets into your brain, these connections with adverts and theme tunes and things. So, but it's a beautiful melody. And when we were looking for tunes, Vasilis suggested that. There's a version by Stanley Turrentine, and we kind of took that and tweaked it a bit and made it our own, and yeah, it's a lot of fun to play, and it just goes to show, I think, that the repertoire, going back to the conversation earlier about the American songbooks, if a good tune can work wherever it's from, whenever it's from. So you can play Bach in jazz, you can play Dvorak, you can play anything if it's done in the right way. So it's great fun to play as well.
Good. Can I ask you, at this point, I sometimes in the middle I play another track, and I'd like to play a bit of Lockdown London.
Sure.
And that's got you on soprano, Vasilis. Is that right?
On soprano, yeah, soprano saxophone, which that particular soprano that I used on the recording, I haven't got it anymore. I sold it. I've got an even better soprano now, which I'm a bit gutted. I mean, it was a beautiful instrument that I used for that recording, but now I've got an even better one. I'm a little bit gutted that I didn't have my current soprano, but still, I think my previous soprano did a good job.
It did on its own, without any help from you.
On its own, no help.
So who wrote that track?
That one's one of mine, yeah.
There are two things going on for me in that: the quiet of London, but also there's a bit of the frenetic as well. So what were you trying to get across when you wrote that?
Well, so where I'm based in London, it's actually, when the traffic's good, it's actually very quick to get into central London. So during lockdown, there was a point where we were allowed to go a little bit further. You weren't just staying to your local park for your one daily trip out. So me and my wife Kate, we got in the car and drove from where we are in Colliers Wood up to round about Victoria and parked and just wandered round central London, where there's no one there apart from cyclists and maybe one or two other people like us looking around. Which, when you go to see what it looks like now, the idea that you walk through Trafalgar Square or Leicester Square and there's basically no one there is just something quite amazing to have seen. So it was kind of inspired by that. And it's definitely got a certain melancholy to it, because I think at that time, again, it was hard not to be a little bit melancholy. But it's something about all that, maybe that built up tension that was waiting to release once we were all free. I don't know. But it was just an expression of all of that feeling of what it felt like to be in London, where, because it was kind of beautiful, but it felt wrong at the same time. It's amazing, like seeing all these places with no one there, but that's not what London is. London's this bustling community, metropolitan community of people, often getting on each other's nerves because they're getting in the way of each other and all that. But that's what it is. So when it isn't that, it's something very different. So yeah, it was something to do with all of that.
Yeah. And you're playing on that, Vas, is really lovely. That soprano is beautiful, even though you've got rid of it now.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think because Paul's writing on that particular song, it's a bit of reminiscence of John Coltrane's legendary quartet, and the way they were playing in the early '60s with the great piano player McCoy Tyner. And sort of like a more, I would say, a Coltrane style, with a bit, modal Coltrane style, and and Coltrane was the one who reintroduced soprano saxophone to jazz. I mean, obviously, the legend of soprano saxophone in trad jazz was Sidney Bechet. But he played on a more traditional jazz way. And then Coltrane was the one who sort of reintroduced that particular saxophone in the early '60s with his quartet. And since then, quite a lot of saxophonists, they use it for various things. And I thought that soprano will make justice to what Paul wanted to describe with his tune.
Yeah. So what's next? So this album's coming out in a few weeks' time, and are you going to tour with it?
We've got. I mean, after having done, I don't know, like maybe 10 or 11 Arts Council UK tours, most of them with the guitarist Nigel Price. I don't know whether the word tour or spread is more appropriate, because you say, oh, we're on tour, and people think that you're like on a tour bus, like staying away from home every night. So we have a very nice looking spread of dates around the UK. I think that's the better way to to put it across.
Yeah, we've got quite a few dates, so kind of all around. We've actually managed to get quite a good spread, in fact, of dates, across the country, which is great because we really want to go and play this music to people. And we've got this idea in mind as well, which we've got to do at some point, that we should do a gig in all the places named on the front cover.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really
be a first. I don't think they've ever had a jazz gig in Chesley Street, maybe. Other than when I was playing the church organ, but
Athens is easy. I can arrange that. Very easy. Boston, I'm not sure. Maybe Boston, Lincolnshire.
I was going to say, go to the other Boston, the UK one. Oh, brilliant. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, where is the best place for people to find out about where they can see you and hear you?
Our websites.
Yeah, we've both got websites, which is just our names, which aren't as complicated as people think they are.
No.
But yeah, if you search, I mean, even if you spell, I think either our names wrong, Google, I think probably gets you there in the end. So if you look up our web pages, and we're both on social media and all that stuff as well, so there's plenty of ways to find out.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put all of those links in the show notes.
Brilliant.
Maybe special mention to our album launch gig, which is at Pizza Express, Dean Street, on April 29th.
Ah, okay. Oh, well, that would be a good one.
We promise that if people are intrigued to hear more about the stories behind the tunes, they're going to hear all the stories on the gig.
Brilliant. I love what they've done with the Pizza Express in Dean Street. They've turned it around a bit, and it's nice now. I think it's a bit tight when you're in the audience. So the tables are a bit close together, but it's a lovely venue now.
It's
a lovely venue. Yeah.
It's always fun playing there, and I personally, I absolutely love the piano.
Oh, right.
beautiful Steinways. So it's always a pleasure. You literally could play just a C major chord and you suddenly feel like a genius just because it's a Steinway D.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Hilary, for inviting us.
I hope you enjoyed listening to that conversation with Paul and Vasilis. What you're listening to now is Coming Home to You, which is that ballad that Paul was talking about. I hope you enjoy listening to it. Thank you for joining me once more for Harmonious World. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.